Welcome. Step into the lab. On this podcast, we will be discussing the practices, research, science, and technology surrounding alternative medicine, where listeners will gain valuable insight and information with every episode. Just as a reminder, the Mind or a Lab podcast is for educational and informational purposes solely. All subjects on this podcast should not be construed as medical or legal advice. You should always seek out help from a professional provider. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is episode 16 now with Dr. Brian Nichols. How are we doing today, Doctor?
I'm excellent. Dorian, how are you today?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you for being here. I just want to say, it was a cool way of meeting and introducing myself at MJ Biz Con, and I was really stoked to be there by myself, just kind of scoping out the land and seeing who was bringing something to the table that I have not seen yet in the industry. And especially being a physician, I think that's awesome that you're contributing to the cannabis industry.
Oh, thank you, Dorian.
So just to jump into it and, share a little bit about your backstory, where are you from? Where did you grow up? What did you study in college?
Well, I was born in LaGrange, Illinois.
Okay.
Uh, we moved to Little Rock, Arkansas when I was in high school, completed high school here. Uh, Attended college here, right in Little Rock also. Originally wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a writer until I took a few courses, and I was routinely criticized as being derivative and exploitative, I think, came up a lot as far as my writing went. So, writing really wasn't for me.
Mhm.
I had always, since a child, been interested in sciences. In fact, I remember for my seventh birthday, I requested and did receive a preserved frog in a jar and a dissecting set that I
Really?
enjoyed for quite some time. Yeah, so I ended up going back into studying biology. Found out I had a knack for it, was very interested in it. Um, did some undergraduate research, assisting in some cancer research. Became interested in medicine as I became introduced to the people involved in the research. Ended up applying to med school, getting into med school. Originally, was not sure what specialty I was interested in.
Mhm.
Um, as my studies progressed, physiology in particular, I was terribly interested in, and the way you can modify physiology using drugs through pharmacology.
Mm.
That naturally drew me right into the practice of anesthesiology, is
Okay.
what I subsequently trained in. After practicing anesthesia uh, in Little Rock for a year and a half, 2 years, there was a demand for pain management, which I had studied in my residency. I started doing more and more pain management and realized that I really did like interacting with patients, developing relationships with them and talking with them. And my practice gravitated towards exclusively pain management right around the turn of the last century.
Interesting. So, I think with just the field that you chose, was there a particular reason you went into pain management? Was there a defining moment that made you basically say, all right, this is the specialty that I want to go into?
Well, as an anesthesiologist, patients don't really notice you a whole lot. They don't necessarily appreciate you if they don't remember the surgery. They're pain free. You did a good job, but
Hmm.
they never even know who you are.
Right.
Not that that's bad at all, but I did not have that relationship with patients when I started doing a bit of pain management and helping patients through their issues, improving the quality of their life. That was extremely rewarding to me personally. And I did enjoy that part of my practice, and that's the main reason I moved over to pain management. And also, quite honestly, the lifestyle of a pain management physician, as far as call hours and things, is a lot better than that of anesthesia. I spend every other day on call, sometimes working, 36 hours straight. Not really good for your own personal health. So it's a good move for me personally, but the main thing is I get to really experience with the patients the improvement of quality of life, and that's extremely rewarding.
Absolutely. I think having that one-on-one attention, being in a more clinical setting where you're not being rushed onto the next procedure makes a lot more sense, especially when you're dealing with such a complex topic surrounding pain management. So, when you got into pain management, at that time when you opened up your own clinic, I'm assuming, and at that time what was what was being prescribed to patients mainly to deal with their pain before cannabis was in the picture?
Well, of course, the particular history at the time I was training and everything, we were very pro using opioids.
Mm,
Pain with this was the fifth vital sign. There was no reason people should suffer pain. So
mhm,
opioids figured in very, very dramatically in our practice. I've always been a proponent of a multimodal analgesia, meaning I would work in, depending on the patient's etiology, I would work in tricyclic antidepressants for neuropathic symptoms. Same thing with some of the anti-seizure drugs. Benzodiazepines have utility in some situations. SSRIs, SNRIs, really the whole armamentarium of any medications that could affect any of the pain pathways were incorporated in there and quite aggressively. Although personally, in my own practice, I do think opioids can be used safely, even in
mhm,
higher doses in a great percentage of patients. There still is a subsection of the population that will, I don't know if it's a genetic type issue, that will become addicted and develop problematic opioid use. So it
mhm,
was very imperative to monitor patients for this over time. None of these medications are without side effects and possible risks, and it became really a balancing act very often with patients that have complicated presentations
mhm.
to level things out, balancing the side effects and risks against potential symptom improvement.
Interesting. So, the thing with opioids, and you already touched base on this just a little bit with addiction. Did you see a lot of people that would come in with psychosomatic pain? Or was it like actual like chronic illness where they were suffering of this ailment of a form of pain that they couldn't manage on their own?
The vast majority of patients really had an identifiable cause, still do, identifiable cause of their pain.
Okay,
The patients have somatization disorders. You can kind of sort through them just with clinical experience over the years. I've developed, we all
right.
develop that gestalt when that's happening. And, with ranging psychiatric referrals, you can pretty much sort those people out over time.
Right, right. And I think that's a valuable skill that physicians need to carry. I often saw that in the emergency department where you could immediately tell if someone was actually in pain and who was drug seeking. And it's unfortunate that um, people get into those cycles, those loops that they can't break out of. So, I think with me focusing on looking at alternatives and just managing an overall lifestyle is what I started gravitating towards and just kind of swayed out from going into a medical profession. So, can you tell me some of the hardships that you've learned about the U.S. healthcare system?
Well, probably the biggest thing I've learned about the U.S. healthcare system over the years is that whether it's the literature, certainly the training that we receive as physicians, there's a thumb on the scale, and that would be the pharmaceutical industry highly controls our education. Coming out of my residency, Dorian, we studied so long, you passed all these tests, you've done all these cases, you think you know everything, you
Right.
know. It's only when you come out and practice for a short period of time independently that you realize there's a lot more we don't know
Mhm.
than what we do.
Mhm.
And for me, the transition over to looking or even considering natural medicine, I was quite prejudiced against it, just because of my education,
Right.
was in the late 90s in my chronic pain practice, it became a standard of care that you would have to do urine drug screens on your patients to
Mhm.
confirm that they're taking the medications prescribed and also to make sure they're not taking any illegal substances.
Right.
When I first started doing this on my patients, I saw a bunch of them had carboxy THC, the metabolite of delta 9 THC, in their
Mhm.
urine. Now, I knew from being a younger man that the cannabis was not hurting my patients. I wasn't worried about anything like that. I am an independent practice physician. I don't answer to a corporation. I have nobody looking over my shoulder. I decided to tell my patients, look, I'm not worried about THC. I just heard how THC was starting to be used medically. There was a whole lot of information. I really hadn't read much about it.
Mhm.
But again, considering the safety profile, I told my patients, I'm just looking the other way on THC, and I really didn't pay much more attention to it. After about a year and a half, though, it became very obvious to me going through my charts. My patients popping up for THC,
Mhm.
they're not my problem patients. They're doing better with fewer medications at lower doses. And that's really when I started becoming interested in cannabis as a medication, started educating myself. They didn't even know about the endocannabinoid system when I graduated from school. So I started educating myself and learning about it. And it's been a gradual evolution for me as far as incorporating the ancient medication into my practice. The more I have learned about it and used it over the years, the more I have seen how it can exactly what I observed originally. It can decrease the use for prescribed medications or replace a lot of them.
Mhm.
The pharmaceuticals, as you well know, and as most of your listeners and viewers know, they're not without side effects and complications and toxicity. The ability to reduce the use of them or eliminate the use of them with a medication that has relatively well tolerated side effects and almost zero toxicity is a huge win for the patient on so many different fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome that you were able to start seeing the data in real time while connecting with the patients and developing that relationship with them where you're like, hey, I'm noticing that you're taking less of, tramadol. You're taking less of something that I would normally continue to prescribe to you because you are focused more on taking this other option that is not legal for you to be smoking, ingesting, etc. However, your ailments are being relieved by taking this cannabis use in whatever form it is. And I think with how you're saying the the ability to go out and do your self analysis of the research that's available allowed you to start tapping into how cannabis can be used therapeutically because it was so stigmatized for so long of it just being something that was used recreationally and whoever used it was in some sort of way less than. I mean, that's just always depicted with like Cheech and Chong movies or any other propaganda
Mhm.
that was released. And it's like, no, this is something that can benefit a lot of people. And it doesn't always have to be in the fashion of being inebriated.
Well, the recreational perspective on cannabis is very, very different
Right.
from the medical perspective. I look to really optimally address patient symptoms while minimizing side effects. The main side effect of cannabis is, of course, the euphoric effects, and it can be done quite easily. I always tell people that if people don't need my advice on how to get high, everybody can figure that out. Controlling your symptoms very, very well and not impairing the activities of your daily living, that's where a more nuanced approach comes in as far as using cannabinoids and terpenes as medications.
And to piggyback off of that, so when were you first personally introduced to cannabis use or even psychedelic use? Did you experiment with it prior to starting to use it therapeutically in your practice, or were you just on the on the outskirts just doing research?
Well, it's certainly as a kid,
Mm,
I had tried cannabis, and retrospectively looking back on things, because I did use cannabis for a while as a teenager, it really, I thought it was just partying with it. But I used to get migraine headaches as a kid.
mhm,
When I started using cannabis, my
mhm,
migraine headaches really went away. I didn't have a whole lot of them. When I was a child, I was kind of a high stress kind of a person. I started relaxing, backing off. I was not as uptight as I once was. I When I was a kid, ADD was not a diagnosis. There was really no such thing. But I've got it roaring through me, and I think I was actually self-medicating with cannabis at that time to help with it.
mm,
Later on, as I became an adult, of course, didn't use much cannabis, but it was really after the 2018 Farm Bill came out, and I'd already been incorporating cannabis in a lot of my patients. Originally, working with black market cannabis, I was kind of limited in being able to give patients advice.
right.
We did the best we could with what we had. As more and more states started legalizing cannabis for medical and later recreational purposes, my patients, well, some of them got friends out of state, and they started having access to more specific cultivars, specific strains that I would direct them to. That allowed me to learn a lot more about getting cannabis directed in. But it was really the 2018 Farm Bill that opened things up tremendously, because we had access to CBD at that point in time, which is probably the most useful cannabinoid and has been for me personally. I've been using whole plant extract CBD on a 2 times a day basis since it's been available. And I
Mhm.
do use additional terpenes that I mix in myself to control my ADD. It's corrected some of my metabolic syndrome. I've managed to lose about 80 pounds
It's
since
amazing.
starting CBD therapy. It's made a tremendous improvement in the quality of my life as far as that goes.
Mhm.
I do believe a lot of the other medical benefits of CBD, just the basic health benefits, have been a benefit to me as far as the antiviral, antibacterial properties. We all got COVID, but my experience with COVID is relatively limited. It was a mild severity type thing. I credit the CBD for that. I've seen that in my other patients. Uh, in addition to the ADD, I didn't really realize that I got a little bit of chronic back pain and an anxiety disorder when, as most patients do, I became non-compliant with my therapy for about a week.
Mhm.
Started realizing, my back hurts. I'm
Yeah,
a
yeah.
little stressed out. And it's like, what's going on? You missed your medications, Brian. That's what the problem was. So my own experience has been, as a kid, I realized it was self-medicating. Didn't realize it until I was an adult, practicing cannabis medicine, that was going on. And for me personally, I'm a medical cannabis patient, but most of my use goes down to the other cannabinoids, CBD, CBG, and particularly the terpenes. You know, a lot of the literature, people talk about how the terpenes help the cannabinoids
Mhm.
work. My experience, particularly using the BlissThera devices, I think it's cannabinoids that help the terpenes work. I think the terpenes are so much more important in modulating the physiology of the human body than they've been given credit for.
So before we get into how you started BlissThera and the device that I saw at MJ Biz Con, can you break down in your experience what dosages of CBD are actually therapeutically beneficial? Because there's a lot of products on the market, right? Where
Yeah.
they're like, all right, it's 10 to 100 milligrams in range, but what's the target range that you've seen in your practice that makes the most sense to where you actually start feeling the effects of it?
The first problem you see, and you notice in the literature too, I know you read the literature, you'll see dose ranges. This we're using 350 milligrams of CBD twice a day, and then you see another study where they're using 32 milligrams of CBD twice a day. We're
Mhm.
comparing apples and oranges here. Typically, the CBD isolate, CBD molecule, that demonstrates a very, what we call a linear dose response curve. If you, or I'm sorry, a bell shaped dose response curve for the single molecule stuff, low, here I'm making hand puppets here, low doses of the drug, you see no response. And it isn't until you hit a relatively higher dose threshold that you will start to see a clinical response in the patients. That continues through a relatively narrow dose range to where you go above it, you either get side effects that pop up or efficacy decreases. So
Mm,
they're kind of tough to dose. And you have a ceiling effect, above a certain dose, it's not going to work. That's what you see with single molecule CBD. And that's what typically in papers, when you see high dose ranges, I assume they're using single molecule CBD. I think they should
mhm,
tell us. Also, in some of the products that are available, a lot of them just have CBD in there. A whole plant extract, however, of the hemp plant, it has the CBD in there. You're going to probably find some of the CBG molecule. You might find some CBDV. There's probably THC, less than 0.3% in there. You might find some cannabichromene and an assortment of different terpenes. I am a firm believer and practice cannabis medicine based on the entourage effect, which is it is the presence of the more than 500 different chemicals that may or may not be present in a particular specimen of cannabis. It is the presence and the relative ratio of those that are present that determine the effects that cannabis produces. It also goes on to show us that it is the interaction of all these together makes them more effective than any one of them alone. So with whole plant CBD, we don't see a bell-shaped response curve. We see a linear dose response curve.
mm,
Low doses cause an effect. As you increase it, you continue to see effects,
okay.
and that continues to increase. So most patients require a much lower dose of a whole plant CBD than they would a single molecule thing. To get around to finally answering your question, I start most of my patients on a whole plant CBD extracts, about 16 milligrams sublingually twice a day.
Okay.
The thing I have patients do is I teach them to do their own drug dose titration. To do that dose over a period of time, to keep a journal of their symptoms, refer back to their journal depending on what it is, how long I kind of specify to them. For most patients
Mhm.
with chronic things, a week's plenty. Review their journal. If they're not having adequate symptom improvement, increase the dose 25 to 50%. Continue to do that until they have adequate symptom improvement. If they get good symptom improvement and not getting adequate duration of effects over 12 hours, then you use the same dose every 8 hours. That's essentially what doctors do all day long
Right.
with drug dose titrations. Patients can do this themselves. It is not difficult. It allows people to get their medications dialed down exactly where they need to be. And with CBD in particular, I think patients should be diligent about that.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that, especially the whole plant extract. So when I was doing CO2 extraction, I was primarily pulling out everything from the plant, and I would source from various farms, indoor, greenhouse, outdoor. And what I saw was that outdoor extract was particularly high in CBG and CBC, and when I would use those products in an oil form, whether it be through vaporization or if it was just ingestion by taking one of the disposable syringes and just like eating that or putting that sublingually under my tongue, letting it dissolve, I would have a much better high overall that would be prolonged, and it wouldn't be very short like with what you would have if you were smoking a distillate cart that was in combination with terpenes. And the cool thing about CO2 extraction is that it's not just focusing on one particular molecule. You're pulling out all of the cannabinoids and the terpenes that are available that the plant has to offer, and being able to introduce those terpenes right back into the oil at a certain percentage, it made it even more enjoyable because you are seeing that synergistic effect of all of these phytochemicals binding to your receptors in certain ways that allow you to experience what the strain actually has to offer. So that's awesome that you're able to pinpoint that with CBD and the other terpene profiles that you're building. So now I want to segue into, how did you start BlissThera, and how did you think of this device, and explain that to the audience?
Well, the device is not my invention at all.
Mm,
Mike Kaskazlowski, he's a classically trained artist. He's an ocularist and actually does prosthetics for people who have lost noses through cancer surgery, ears, and so forth. Mike is an inventor, and he, about more than a decade ago, I guess now, even longer than that as far as his research has gone, he was looking to create healthy, immersive travel experiences for people.
okay.
One of the biggest things as far as memory and such goes for people is scent. And Mike had been working for years to develop a scent kind of vision, smell-o-vision essentially is what he was working on.
Okay.
I'd met Mike out before and had some great conversations with him. He knew I was practicing cannabis medicine. And he asked me to come by the lab. He had something he wanted to show me. So he showed me the initial device. It was a prototype device that he was developing, and it was great. He'd play on a computer screen, and a forest scene popped up in front of me. This device was blowing a little room air stream in my face, and you
Hmm.
know what? I could smell trees. I could smell moss. I could smell dirt. The scene panned over to a campfire. I could smell campfire smoke coming through me through this device.
Okay.
Went over to another scene. People are cooking pizza. I smell pepperoni. So went through the demonstration here, and Mike told me what he had developed here. During the testing, of course, on people, people found it very interesting, but they also would start saying how, I'm not nervous anymore. My back doesn't hurt. I feel good. Mike, of course, tied it into the terpenes that were present in the essential oils. This machine uses different combinations of essential oils to mix them together in different ratios to
Hmm.
create millions of different scents. Mike asked me to come in and start working on terpene profiles for wellness rooms that I guess very wealthy people put in their homes.
Okay.
Well, as I started doing a little work with Mike on this, we appreciated the possibility of this as being a new administration device for cannabinoids and terpenes. And that's where my area of interest in the company, and I was brought in as medical director to really develop this as a therapeutic aromatherapy device.
That's so fucking fascinating. There's so many levels that we could tap into there, because first
Yeah.
off, it all started from aromatherapy. Like there was no like intention to introduce cannabis at all, and just with understanding our basic biology and like how we evolved over time, um, the senses, and then primarily being the olfactory system, like giving you the alert of if something is dangerous or if it's going to be beneficial, is so, it's so important. So the fact that like when you walk in a forest and immediately after 15 minutes being able to smell everything that the forest has to offer, you're almost in this natural blissful state because of all of the molecules that are being released from the plants that interact with your brain and give you that sense of relief.
And one of the things is mentioned the forest benefit. Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing is the English translation for that. It was in the early '80s that the Japanese government started noticing their citizens that spend time in the forest. They're healthier than the rest of the people. They just seem to be doing better. They started doing a little bit of research on it, and wow, these people had lower blood pressures, lower heart rates, lower cortisol levels, a measure of stress. Their levels of CD8 cells, particular cells that kill cancer, were
Mhm.
higher. They eventually started doing a little bit more research and tied it into the high levels of terpenes that were concentrated between the forest floor and the low forest canopies of the Japanese forest typically. And it is recommended to all their citizens to do Shinrin-yoku several hours a week for just the simple health benefits of it.
That's so amazing, and I think if you do have that privilege to be around areas of natural preserve, it's so beneficial for you to go out and enjoy it at least once or twice a week. And, you know, living in the Northwest for about 5 years really opened me up to the therapy that does get introduced to you if you have nature nearby. And I think with just how major cities are growing massively, more people need to realize that we have to go back to where we started and really get into that state of well-being through these different therapy modalities. So how can this device be used in a clinical setting, and how is it beneficial for patients?
Well, just talking about Shinrin Yoku, you have to spend hours, many, many hours, days out in the forest to get these medical benefits. We human beings, we don't live like that anymore. Our diets are terrible. Our exposure to the natural and vibrant terpenes is way down. With our particular device, we can essentially bring all of the essences from the forest right into your local environment. One of the things that has happened over the years with our chemistry colleagues is they have managed to really deconstruct essential oils that have been used for thousands of years
Hmm.
for medical benefits. We through the analysis, we know all the different terpenes that are in essential oils. Then they come along and now they can distill off the individual terpene isolates and out of many, many, many different plants, and they are available in their isolated forms. Other chemists have, from the CBGA molecule, CBGVA molecule, you can now produce any cannabinoid you want, even the minor trace ones that are hardly present in cannabis. They're producing those now and they're available in their individual forms
Hmm.
commercially. Now, what we've done at BlissThera is we have found a technique to turn all of these different isolated plant essences, the terpenes, cannabinoids, and other plant essences, into liquid forms that are suitable for inhalation. The machine has different cartridges in it. Each cartridge has a different mix, or it might have isolates, depends on which one we're talking about, of cannabinoids and terpenes. The programming on the machine allows me to determine which cartridge is activated for how long. Each is its own individual nebulization device designed to nebulize off a certain amount of liquid per unit time as a mist. That mist is mixed with room air in a vortex chamber, we call it, and then is fan delivered to the patients as a room air stream with cannabinoids and terpenes in there. This avoids a lot of the chemical degradation that typically occurs through a heating process, whether it's combustion or vaporization. More importantly, though, it allows me to determine exactly what mix of cannabinoids and terpenes is delivered, and I'm able to deliver many of these, including these minor cannabinoids and terpenes that might not even be found in cannabis, in doses sufficient to see a clinical response. So I'm able to really create any type of profile that I'm looking for on the fly, on the spot for an individual patient. Um, Over the last several years, essentially experimenting with my patients on this, I've been able to determine what combinations of terpenes and cannabinoids produce certain effects.
Hmm.
This is the kind of thing that has almost been impossible to do prior to having access to a device like this, especially on the terpene side. If you read a lot of the terpene literature, there's certainly a lot in there about anti-inflammatory properties. They may have anti-cancer properties, antifungal properties, all of that. How does it make people feel? There's very little about that. And by prior experimentation using terpene tinctures, it takes a while for those things to kind of set up and see their effects.
Hmm.
The inhaled route of administration works immediately. So I'm able to get immediate feedback from patients on how this particular terpene isolate may make them feel. And when I stack it with an essential oil isolate I have, it changes things. And by using different combinations, you can change things as far as headspace goes, and certainly on the medical side, as far as leveraging the benefits for whatever particular disease process you're trying to affect.
So, walk me through this. Like, say for instance, I was a patient and I had migraines, And I
Mhm.
came into your office, come into the room, I sit down, and I say, these are my symptoms. They've been prolonged for X amount of months. How can I benefit from this therapy today? Like, what am I going to experience?
Well, the therapy is surprisingly effective for a wide variety of conditions. There's almost nothing in my allopathic medicine practice that I've used on patients where I get such a high response rate and an immediate one with them. Uh, I would say overall, I get a response, some type of response, in more than 90% of patients, whatever condition I'm treating.
Hmm.
As far as absolutely no response, I've seen that in a handful of patients. I got my own theories on why that's not working. Side effects are few and far between. I've seen no adverse events or serious adverse events. The only side effects I see, some patients will experience mild transient euphoric symptoms, and
Hmm.
some patients may get a little bit of sedation from it. That's about it. Patients essentially sit down in a recliner. We have an administration appliance. It's just a little tube that blows the air mixed with the biomedia in the direction of their face.
Okay.
We just have them breathe normally. There is no inhalation through a mask or a wand. This device is not a medical device, Doreen. It is an aromatherapy diffuser. So we create a local atmosphere around the patient with high concentrations of the cannabinoids and terpenes specific for either the condition we're looking to hopefully affect the symptoms that they're having,
Hmm.
or the particular mood modification that they're looking to achieve. As they sit there and breathe this, treatments last anywhere from 15 minutes, with individual things might be 5 minutes long. With some of my patients with more complicated disorders needing multiple therapies out to an hour. All they do is sit there and breathe. That's all there is to it.
Wow, that's yeah, and just like seeing that at MJ Biz Con and like how you were explaining it to me was just so mind-boggling because there's always that suspicion that, and I mean it is like you're inhaling something that's being ignited and being turned into a different molecule that ultimately you're decreasing the amount of oxygen that is going into your lungs when you are smoking in any type of fashion. So the fact that you're able to create this experience through a machine that is like passively wafting these molecules and that are biologically active and able to gain the same results is fucking awesome. And I think and I congratulate you guys on being the first to like make this move. I think this will be something that will definitely carry through into clinical practices because now you can monitor somebody in a clinical fashion and also see the benefits right away, depending on how many like how much time they have to be there for the administration of these compounds. So I think like over long-term use, what have you seen with your patients who come in for these treatments?
Well, interestingly, almost all patients, vast majority of patients that come in and try a treatment, they are going to see an improvement in their symptoms. Sometimes they get complete resolution after a single treatment. The duration of improvement I've seen after a single treatment is as short as an hour, as long as 3.5 weeks. Of course, those are outliers. Most people run in the 12 to 36-hour range of very significant symptom improvement. Typically, symptoms will return. They come back at a lower level, though. Now, if we stack another treatment, if we catch them before it gets all the way bad, we do another treatment again, it will knock their symptoms down to a lower level. Symptoms come back up over a period of time, again, not to a high enough level. Stack treatments on like this, and you see a stair stepping off of symptoms. I typically, depending on what the patient's symptoms are, I'll treat them once a week. I like to start initially more aggressively if they're really having issues.
Mhm.
Um, and assess their improvement every time. At some point, 3 or 4 treatments later, typically they're going to come in for their follow-up treatment. I'll say, "Well, how'd the last one work for you?" They go, "Oh, it worked pretty good." I said, "How bad are your symptoms today?" "Well, hardly at all." "All right." So we had almost a week of symptom improvement at that point in time. I say, "Well, let's do your treatment today. Schedule the next one out 2 weeks
Mhm.
and see how they do." Everybody's different as far as how it goes. And I essentially let patients declare themselves how long they need for maintenance therapies. I have patients, some patients, they do need weekly therapy for the very severe things. I have other patients that 4 or 6 weeks, even 8 weeks, is how long they need before a maintenance treatment goes. And I've been asked before, well, how do you explain this maintenance treatment stuff? Dorian, I think, or the little analogy I use is we have vitamin deficiencies, right? You
Mhm.
correct a vitamin deficiency in somebody, the body's allowed to heal itself again. What if we have clinical terpene deficiencies because we don't live our life outside in nature anymore? And when we finally get enough of the clinical terpene deficiencies, whatever these people need, corrected, it's allowing the body to heal itself. People go back to living life as they normally do, eventually gets depleted, and they need to be touched up again. Now, that's probably not exactly what's happening, but it's a useful way to kind of an analogy to explain it to people.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I've never even thought of that in particular because, yeah, I mean, a vast majority of the population is deficient in vitamin D production, whether that be if you're actually being exposed to sunlight or just genetically. That's just how you're operating currently, and it's a awesome theory to think about being terpene depleted because we are far removed from natural landscapes that we can't get to on a regular basis. It's the same thing with being stuck inside all day and not being exposed to sunlight or just being outside in general. So no, thank you for that analogy. uh, the next thing that I want to ask is, can you explain to the audience some of the research you have compiled with BlissThera?
Well, Dorian, first of all, I am not a scientist. I am a clinician. So the research I've done is essentially of a clinical nature, practicing with my patients.
Hmm.
The algorithms I've come up with as far as, why do I decide to use this particular mix of cannabinoids and terpenes in these patients? Most of this, yeah, I refer back to, the original literature. PubMed is a great resource. I'm sure you're in there all the time looking at things for cannabinoid and terpene research. A lot of it is basic science, animal studies, maybe some little clinical studies. That is what I use as a starting point
Hmm.
for kind of determining what I was going to use on patients initially. And from those NIH papers and all that is where I've kind of started to develop my own protocols. And essentially, all of it's been done in house by me working with my patients clinically to develop these particular protocols that are working for them. The thought of actually doing clinical trials, I am doing one right now that I've started doing with some veterans for post traumatic stress disorder. I've had particularly success with that. One of my patients was disabled for more than a decade because of PTSD and chronic pain. The Veterans Administration had him on 23 medications,
Oh, wow.
including antipsychotics and such for his PTSD. He's taking about 50 milligrams of Valium a day, along with 50 milligrams of hydrocodone and a little bit of Jim Beam to keep from killing people. Started treating him with the Bliss. Yeah, he was a rough guy. Had a
Yeah.
tough time. I started treating him with our BlissThera device, and a month later, I get a call from a psychiatrist. She says, "What the hell are you doing to Jim?" And I was a little worried. I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, he's in my office right now. He's shaking 3/4 of a bottle of Valium at me, saying he doesn't need any this month. He's usually here 2 weeks early for a refill. What are you
Wow.
doing to Jim?" So she actually came in to see him get treated, and before her eyes, while he's inhaling this, she knows him quite well. She leans forward. She goes, "You're not anxious anymore, are you, Jim?" He goes, Oh, it's all gone. She could see it on his face. Long story short, this gentleman is down to 3 medications now.
Wow.
He is back working remodeling homes. He's no longer estranged from his family. He's not an exception. Uh, so my research I've done, I would be criticized as being mostly anecdotal, but when I see it work over and over and over again in patients,
Mhm.
over and over and over again, I have a hard time believing there's much placebo effect going on, or if it is placebo effect, why haven't we been using placebo all my career? That's what I would ask.
Uh, Thank you for sharing that story. It's always awesome to hear directly how this is beneficial for people in various manners, and especially if it curves the amount of medications that you do have to take. I think it's stressful in itself, where you have to remember that the time to take your prescription med to be like, all right, this is the only way that I function, and it's sometimes just like it's detrimental overall with the side effects that accompany it, the treatment. So, you're talking about this being in a medical fashion. With this upcoming discussion, how do you view cannabis being or rescheduled to a Schedule 3? Do you think it's going to be beneficial, or do you think it's going to be detrimental to the industry, in your opinion?
Well, a couple things. First, one of the things that I always want to stress with the BlissThera device is, Dorian, this is not going to be a medical device.
Mm,
We're keeping it as aromatherapy diffusion device for one thing. Then you avoid a lot of the stuff as far as regulation goes. It also opens up this to a lot more people than just nurses or physicians being able to use it. And I think that with the safety profile of cannabinoids and terpenes, the more people have access to it, the better people are going to do with it. I think long term, as far as research goes with it, of course, we're going to be collecting data on the back end of this. But I think the success of the product is going to argue whether or not it is effective overall. As far as the rescheduling of cannabis goes, there is a lot of excitement in the industry for it. Everybody sees getting out from the IRS 280E rule, being able to deduct business expenses is a big plus. But I'll tell you, sir, I prescribe controlled substances all day long in my practice, including Schedule 3 substances. As I understand Schedule 3 substances, you have to have a prescription from a physician for a specific purpose for a controlled 3 substance. Prescription has to say what it is. It has to have a DA number on it. It has to be dispensed by a DEA licensed pharmacy for exactly what is on the prescription. All right. They say that, well, we go Schedule 3. We're not going to enforce any of those rules. I, for one, am a little suspicious about that, Dorian. Yeah, I don't know if they'd have the resources to all of a sudden the DA says, okay, it's a Schedule 3 thing. Every medical patient, you're going to have a script from your doctor for the exact thing you need with the exact list of things on it. It has to be dispensed through a DA licensed pharmacy, which is going to increase cost dramatically, just as having to see a physician for a script is going to increase cost dramatically to the patients. I could see them, if they did go full Schedule 3, call the Schedule 3, where it would kill the medical cannabis industry, at least make it very, very difficult, and it would destroy the recreational cannabis business, because I've never written a scheduled drug for a patient for recreational purposes, and I don't think there's any doctor that would.
mhm.
It's unethical to do that. Um, that said, if they don't enforce the Schedule 3 laws, again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why you put it on Schedule 3 and then not enforce the rules and regulations for it. It does open up things for more research and all this that they say. I think if it does go to Schedule 3 and they back away from enforcing the regulation, it's a way for the pharmaceutical industry to really start gaining some control over that. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ups and downs with how this could play out. And I think you touched on a specific thing that I haven't done much research into. So, how do pharmacies get approved? How do they open up? Is that a DEA thing that's getting regulated?
Oh yeah, they have to carry ID and licensure. In fact, there was don't remember what state it was, but they were going to have their pharmacies dispense cannabis. They're going to be the first ones in the country that allowed, I think it was low THC CBD things to be dispensed through their medical cannabis program.
Okay.
These pharmacies that applied for that received letters from the DEA that they will lose their DEA license for everything else if they are dispensing Schedule One substances. So the DA is paying attention to that. As far as at least on this one instance goes, if Schedule 3 comes down, you're going to have to be a pharmacy. I don't know what these dispensaries are going to do. I mean, they are not pharmacies. There'd have to be a whole nother thing carved out for them. I see a jump to Schedule 3 as being a real big issue. The one thing I have seen proposed is how about a new schedule, a Schedule 6, to where the federal government really has no say on it. It's up to the states for Schedule 6 drugs to decide what they want to do with them. That may be a more viable option. Um, on the other hand, complete descheduling of cannabis, I think, would be the best for the industry, for medicine, and for patients in general.
Schedule 6. I've never even heard of that. Like, so is that something that DEA would have to come up
It,
with?
and this just a proposal somebody threw out
Uh-huh.
there. Okay, let's have a Schedule 6. That would have to be something DA would have to come up with, to where essentially the Fed say we got nothing to do with this. It's up to the states to do what you want with it. Really, the best option would be complete descheduling from the Controlled Substances Act is what I think it should be. Should have never been there in the first place, as Nixon's own advisory team told him in the early 70s. So
Wow. Yeah, no, thank you for breaking that down because I think it's a lot of there's a lot of confusion around it, especially with people who are trying to navigate the industry of, okay, do I jump in and start a business or is this all going to be erased by the rescheduling? And if so, um, you know, why would I continue operating a business that might be erased essentially, especially in the states that are the biggest proponents, like all along the West Coast and starting to gravitate more towards the East Coast. Like the Midwest has been adopting it a little bit faster. But I think with what you're saying, yeah, with the idea that there will be more research involved if it does get rescheduled, then that opens up more clinical trials, right? And more standardizations. So I think there's pros and cons to all of it. However, like you're saying, would they turn the cheek and allow states to continue operating the way that they are doing already? That is the big question.
certainly is.
So, what excites you most about the future of cannabis therapy treatments?
Really, I think the future is going to be very, very focused effects we're looking at getting. And there is a lot you can do with particularly the minor cannabinoids that have not been really clinically used a whole lot. And that's one of the things with BlissThera that I've been able to do is incorporate the so-called minor cannabinoids. I've learned you get the right dose in there, they have major effects. Whether it's tetrahydrocannabivarin, a lot of people talking about how it's used for appetite suppression. It does work. I've developed a program with BlissThera specifically for appetite suppression is what it does. I use it. I call it metabolism support because tetrahydrocannabivarin in adequate doses interacts just not with the CB1R receptor that everybody's familiar with, but with PPA gamma R receptors in the periphery that are gene expression receptors. By interacting with these particular receptors on end organs, it increases the expression of insulin receptors on these organs. I'm using it in my diabetic patients to where I'm seeing their A1C levels start to correct and fall down. I've had patients who I've been using this particular program on. They're off their metformin now. Hey, I lost 20 pounds off my metformin type thing.
Well,
And that's just one little minor cannabinoid, which what we're doing with it. I'm using this for central nervous system inflammation. One of the uh, things in particular that I'm very excited about in the future, and again, this is what I've been doing with BlissThera, is using the proper combination of cannabinoids and terpenes to cut down on central nervous system inflammation in patients with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. We've had some of our dementia patients, primarily Alzheimer's, when they've undergone repeated treatments on this, all of a sudden they're holding on to their memories a lot more. Their behavior issues are dropping down as their memory gets better. One of my patients, or actually the only satellite clinic we have in Fayetteville, Arkansas, has a gentleman who is an engineer, invented the paintball gun. Brilliant man. Developed dementia over time and been all over the country trying to get treatments, anything that would help. Nothing's worked. After going about 6 weeks of treatments with BlissThera, he's remembering stuff his wife doesn't remember anymore. He was able to function as an elder in his church that he was not able to do. Travel to Colorado for a meeting, hasn't been able to do that in years. We have, I've got a patient with Parkinson's who I've been actually working with for about 10 years with medical cannabis, even if it was really on the books.
yeah.
When I started stacking the BlissThera treatments on her, her neurologist has been taking care of her forever. Saw her for an appointment. He said, "Oh, he's in here scratching his chin. Look at my tray." He goes, "Cindy, I don't think you got Parkinson's anymore. I don't know what the hell's going on." Just kind of walked out of the room. Uh, I'm very excited about these in particular because the incidence of dementia is rising more and more in our society, and it is expected to rise. Everybody's warning us about it. And if we, with the older population, it's a huge expense, just not of money, but of human emotion and capital.
Yeah.
These are people that could still be living, good lives with their family if it wasn't for the dementia. If we can really help with that, that's something I'm extremely excited about. Decreasing people's need for pharmaceuticals, of course, is something that I got a strong interest in doing. I do worry that at some point that might make us a target for some things, of course. But looking on at the future, I think all of cannabinoid medicine, cannabis medicine is going to start to be folded in not just cannabis medicine, not just aromatherapy. It is the entire thing of natural medications is what I think is going to be expanding and coming together in the near future. We see people looking at the psychedelics for treatments of certain things. I'm very excited about seeing that.
Mhm.
Using various mushroom extracts to cut down on inflammation and so forth. The use of things like turmeric for cancer things. I think that the natural side of things is going to become bigger and bigger in the future as people realize that not necessarily the pharmaceuticals, not only aren't they answering everything, they do have issues with them, but that these ancient medications, they're ancient medications for a reason. I don't know why we turned our back on a lot of the ancient knowledge that we routinely refer back to in BlissThera to figure things out. It's there for us, and I think people are going to embrace.
100% agree with that. And that's one of the main reasons why I started this podcast was to start talking to subject matter experts who have gone through a long list of experiences in their life and the equipment that they're using, the plant medicines that they've experimented with, etc. It all ties together to coming back to what we ultimately forgot. We forgot that all of this is originating straight from the ground, and we have not gone through every possible scenario of what the natural world has to offer us because we get so excited in science by creating a compound in the lab that can be therapeutically beneficial for people and interact with your body on a certain level.
Yeah, and I applaud you for that because I think that as people learn more and more about using the plant medications, they're going to start looking back at the older stuff. I mean, a lot of what we talk about here, as far as breaking the essences down to their individual things and recombining them, that goes back to the mid 1500s with the spagyric alchemy. It was kind of a bridge between modern allopathic medicine and the homeopathic medicine that was being performed uh, that was going on in the 1500s. It fell out of fashion with allopathic medicine, but really, when you get right down to what we're doing with the BlissThera thing, is we've gone back to that. We've gone back to Paracelsus' way of doing things, of combining the different plant things for specific effects. And then when you get a bad effect, use a different one to modify that. That's essentially what we're doing, and that ancient wisdom still works.
Absolutely. So to close out the episode, I want to ask, some personal stuff, just like so I can get a better understanding, like for you as a person, and what's your favorite podcasts or audiobooks you like to listen to?
Well, I don't listen to a whole lot of audiobooks at all. I'm usually stuck reading, you know, things for research or having to write things.
Right.
Podcasts, a friend of mine does one. Wendy Love Edge has a Roots and Reefer one that's kind of interesting,
Hmm.
where they kind of bring a reggae perspective and a cannabis kind of person together to talk about using it medically.
Hmm.
Podcast wise, I've just started listening to yours, and I really enjoyed the last week's one with the ultrasonic emulsification techniques, something that we may be looking at bringing into a production side of what we're doing after seeing your podcast. So I find that very useful. Audiobooks, I really just don't have time to do a whole lot of them. I guess the last audiobook I listened to actually wasn't an audiobook. The last book I read was, and I recommend this one to everybody. It's called Forest Bathing by Quinn Lee. A great introduction to forest medicine, natural things. Forest bathing is a real easy read. It's a fun one too. That's a book that I would recommend to people if we're talking about books and that.
Forest bathing, that was the title.
Forest bathing. That's what it's called.
Cool.
Dr. Quinn Lee, Li. Great book, full of a lot of great pictures. It really encourages everybody, just as you talked about, spend some time outside. You're going to
Hmm.
feel better.
uh, what's your favorite hobby outside of smoking cannabis?
It's pretty much working all the time. So what I do these days,
Yeah.
if I have a hobby, and I guess you can't really call it a hobby, one of the things my son and I have been doing for a number of years is we provide medical cannabis information for patients online. I do a weekly minute radio spot, Medical Cannabis Minute, that's on some public radio stations around the country. We run it on our website under Cannabis Expert MD. I really enjoy trying to educate people to be their own doctors on this. Many of my colleagues, there are very few of my colleagues really with much of an interest in this, unfortunately. More and more are starting to get it. None of us have been trained in it. Very few of them have any experience in managing patients using medical cannabis.
Hmm.
When it became legal in the state of Arkansas, I realized I'm going to be able to certify so many patients. Most people can get their cards signed and receive just a little bit of improvement in cannabis when they could get a tremendous improvement in their symptoms. And it's just a matter of a little bit of knowledge. So one of my big hobbies is trying to educate people on their use of medical cannabis.
That's cool. The the one last question that I would ask then for you would be, what advice would you give to someone who wants to get into a STEM career, and how would they segue into cannabis or psychedelics?
Well, I think the first thing is you're going to have to get your basic knowledge in place as far as basic biology and chemistry courses and such go. Once you get a really solid knowledge in that, whether you get degreed or not, these days it's probably a good idea to get degreed. Then you got to start seeking out people with the knowledge you're looking for. You're not going to learn everything you need. In fact, most of what you really need to know, you're not going to learn in college courses. You're going to learn by studying underneath somebody, by mentoring underneath somebody, by having somebody that sees that little spark in you, that wants to take you in and pretty much train you up to be like they are. People really need to find a mentor in whatever field that they're interested in. And in STEM in particular, I think that finding somebody in whatever particular field or specialty that you're interested in, they can be paramount in guiding you to where you're going. Even looking back on me, a professor, I had a biology professor. He's the guy that pretty much directed me towards being medicine. He saw that in me. He says, you got what it takes to be a good doctor. Why don't you start looking at this? Why don't you take some of these courses? I'm going to get you to do a little bit of research over here on the cancer side with one of my friends. And that's how I came to where I was. I really credit a mentor with that. I think everybody that is looking to get into something like this should really carefully select and seek out somebody that has those skills.
Very, very good advice, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Having a mentor is just so beneficial because you have a frame of reference to aspire to. Essentially, you're like, okay, this is what I want to absorb from you. Now how do I carve my own path by taking your knowledge, your investment in me, and showing me, a different perspective that I wouldn't have gained, unless I actually went through all the trial and errors that someone else has already compiled.
And those decades of experience they bring to you are so valuable, more valuable than anything you're going to learn in a course. And not just experience in what the specialty is, but other sides of it. There's business aspects to everything that you're not going to learn in your specialty, but you know what? The politics and business things, your mentor will know all about it and be able to warn you on how to deal with those things.
So, if the audience wants to reach out to you, what's a good way to, search your information, the things that you're offering, the radio podcasts?
The As far as and anybody who's interested in BlissThera, go to BlissThera, BlissThera.com. On that website, it explains a little bit more about what the forest medicine system is. But more interestingly, I've actually videotaped patients in my office that have undergone therapies, and they'll tell you how they've done with it. And you actually get to see some people receiving therapies or how the process goes, since you were asking about that. As far as medical cannabis information goes, Cannabis Expert MD, it's all one word, CANNABISEXPERTMD.com is our website. Most of our content is available online on the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channel in particular. We got a lot of videos up there. And of course, they call it X now. We're on that too. Everything under Cannabis Expert MD. The Medical Cannabis Minute is on some, I think, 4 different stations around the country. You can see it on the YouTube channel as well as Facebook things.
Awesome. Well, again, Dr. Nichol, please, thank you so much for stepping outside of the clinic and coming to sit down and talk with me and just go over this extensive conversation of just knowledge dropping that it was like super fun to listen to, and I hope everyone else gets a lot of nuggets out of this episode.
I sure hope so too, Dorian. Thank you so much for inviting me here.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, man.